Well, welcome in everybody. So glad that you're joining us from all over the place. It's amazing. I see the participant count is starting to click up on the side. And so I just want to welcome everybody in and give just some shout outs. I mean, this is great. We've got folks from all over the world that are tuning in with us. And man, I just want to give a little shout out to some of the countries represented that are going to be watching along today. And so Belgium is in the house. Come on. And we got Canada. Oh, Canada. That's right. Our northern neighbors. Colombia, Germany, Ghana. Love that. India, Indonesia, Netherlands, Nigeria, Philippines, South Africa, and several more. They're continuing to come in. Man, Nick, this is exciting, man. We got a worldwide audience.
It's so good to see you all joining us. We're going to have so much fun tonight, just chatting songwriting ministry with all the guys here. We are really amped. It's great that you're with us. Can't wait to get your questions firing in.
That's right. If you, we're going to reserve a little bit of time at the end for some Q&A. So if you have questions that come up as we're going through this that aren't answered by the panel, feel free to drop those into the chat, and we'll get to some of those toward the end and be able to answer some of your questions for you. So you can drop those in at any time during the webinar. So, man, let's go ahead, Nick. Let's just introduce everybody. I'll start off, or why don't you start off? Why don't you tell us who that we have on the panel today?
Well, we're really excited today. What a group of people. Incredible. Firstly, we have got Isaac Bourquet, more commonly known as Guvna B, double award-winning Mobo rapper and author based in London. Isaac, we're so glad that you are here. Jimmy, who's next? Yeah.
We also have Tim Hughes in the house. I'm going to embarrass Tim a little bit. Tim's songwriter, as all of you know, worship artist, and is now the vicar of Gas Street Church in Birmingham, England. Tim, did I say that right? It's Birmingham, right?
Birmingham, yeah, not Birmingham.
Yeah, right. We want to differentiate between the two. So, man, thanks for joining us, Tim.
Thank you. It's great to be with you all.
So good. We've also got Lucy Grimble. We are so thrilled you're here, Lucy. She's a brilliant singer-songwriter, CCM worship artist, based in southeast London at St. Peter's Brockley Church. You're the worship pastor there as well. So we can't wait to hear from you, Lucy. Had a good day?
I have, yeah. Really good day. I'm in the studio, you can see.
Yeah.
You're in a drum shop right now. We're amped about that.
Living room.
Lucy, thanks for joining us. Thanks for representing all the ladies out there. Represent.
Great to do that.
Well, and finally, man, it probably needs no introduction, but Stuart Townend, amazing artist, songwriter, writer of hymns, just a great thinker, great speaker. And so welcome, Stuart. Thanks for joining us.
It's great to be here, Jimmy. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely.
Looking forward to it.
Well, let's start off. We're going to get into some different types of questions, but I mean, obviously the elephant in the room here is just the whole quarantine thing and everything that's been happening. I know a lot of you are involved with church, and maybe let's just talk a little bit about, I'd love to hear from each of you about like, what's the last 3 months been like for you? Maybe both as a creative, but also just, personally with your families, some of the things that have, maybe been some of the highs, maybe some of the lows over the next 3 months. And Tim, maybe we could start with you.
Yeah, well, it's been quite a few months. I've got 4 kids, so mixed in with everything. There's been homeschooling, managing their emotions, managing our emotions. My wife and I, Rachel, we lead a church in Birmingham. And so we've had this kind of massive pivot from meeting together to suddenly everything going online. So you've got, talks and worship, and that's been amazing. I think what we've seen in the UK is an incredible spiritual openness. Some studies have shown that about a third of the UK have said that they've been to church online. Usually on a Sunday, you'd have, 5% of the UK going to church. So that's a massive jump in people trying out church and things like Alpha. And, we've seen lots of people coming to Christ. So I think spiritually, it's been a really exciting time. Also, as a church, we've had all the challenges of there's so much physical, practical need. People are hungry, people haven't been getting food, people are isolated, lonely. So now more than ever, the church has had this incredible opportunity to step up and to serve, and not just to talk about Jesus's love and life and good news, but to demonstrate it. So throw all of that in. It's created a lot of work, you know. At the start, I was thinking, it'd be great, you know, write a few songs, read a few books, watch a few Netflix shows, and I've probably felt more stressed than ever before. So, but it's been good, you know, lots of great opportunities. And when things are challenged and the kind of what was you're familiar with suddenly is no longer possible, it encourages lots of creativity, particularly leadership creativity. So that'd be a little insight from me. I think you're on mute.
Isaac, what's thanks for calling that out, Tim. You got me back, man.
Just before this, we were chatting, and I did a whole long speech on mute, and Jimmy had to correct me. But,
everybody watching along is like, yeah, I get it. Isaac, talk a little bit about what life's been like. I mean, as an artist, you know, even like gigging and stuff like that. Obviously, all of that has sort of shut down. But like, what's your life been like the last several months?
Yeah, it's been interesting, like it has for most, and challenging in parts. I think for me, the two most challenging things is the first thing is I've had to kind of confront who I am as like a husband and a father, and how like active and present I've been and possibly can be. And that's been tough and great at the same time, kind of just realigning what God's vision is for family alongside ministry. And secondly, yeah, of course, not being able to tour has been difficult. We've just released a new album at the start of lockdown, and we had all these plans, and then you kind of realize that, like we can plan as much as we want, but we're never really in control. And I don't know, I've just realized that I've had to be wise about how I use my voice. You know, the voice that God has given us shouldn't be taken for granted, and without touring, you can kind of feel voiceless. But I've tried to have a voice locally and relationally. Some of the conversations that I've been having with people in my sphere have been more fruitful and genuine than ever. So that's been a good thing. But yeah, I'm just inspired that whenever touring kind of happens again, I'm representing people that are voiceless, and God's given me this gift to give a voice to those people. And it's been a privilege to kind of feel what it's like to lose that element of my voice, and giving me a new gratitude. So yeah, challenging, but I'm sure we'll come out better on the other side.
Yeah, wow, that's great. I love the positivity, man.
That's all we got. That's what we got.
Thanks, mate. And Lucy, what about you? What about these last 3 months?
Yeah, I think probably similar to others, it's just been such a mixture of emotions, sometimes day to day, which has actually been, I think personally, I felt the most unsettled I've ever felt in my life. And that even feeling unsettled is sometimes unsettling, because you're like, am I doing okay? But I think it really makes you confront, like, you know, fears and just areas of your life where you're just not trusting God. So I think this has just been such a season of like, am I going to trust God? And just repeatedly coming back to that question. I guess there's sort of two sides to my life at the moment, in that, you know, a singer-songwriter, and in normal time would be traveling around and leading worship in different places. And so obviously that's all stopped. But kind of like Isaac, I'm in the middle of putting out an album, so that has continued, and that's been an interesting challenge to do during lockdown. And then the other half of life is working as a worship pastor at St. Peter's, like you said. And if you told me in January, when I took on the role, my first role as a worship pastor, which I never thought I'd even do, I was just like, I'm just going to help you guys out for 3 months because our last worship pastor left and they were really needed someone. And actually, I've just fallen in love with this role. But if you'd have told me, like in January, you're going to be leading worship every Sunday virtually, like live streaming worship, I would have been like, no thanks. So that has been a challenge, just to kind of show up every Sunday and lead worship live. So this whole virtual worship thing has been such a learning curve. And even, I mean, I'm sure we'll get onto this later, but just, you know, does it work? Like, you know, how do people engage online? Are they getting fed? Are they getting nourished? So I think just having lots of conversations as a leadership team about how we keep people connected and keep people fed and hungry.
Hey, Lucy, thank you. So great to hear your honest reflection on these last 3 months. And guys on the chat, yeah, do let us know, you know, how you're getting on with online worship. We're definitely going to want to dig into that a bit later on and chat through that, as it's something that's affected us all in so many different ways. Stuart, it'd be great to hear from you. The last 3 months, so good to see you.
Wow. Yeah, it's definitely new territory. I think we're kind of going through things that we've not experienced before, and that actually we don't know anybody who's experienced these things before. And yeah, I mean, I think it is, like a lot of people are saying, it is quite up and down. You can go through all sorts of ups and downs personally. And it's been interesting, though, in terms of the community. I live in an area that's quite a close-knit community in many ways, with and it's interesting how barriers seem to break down in terms of people's reserve. People seem to be generally appreciating contact more. And that does give more opportunities to get to know people better. It's amazing walking on the street and how, you know, everybody talks to you. That doesn't usually happen in Brighton, which is a kind of busy, you know, go kind of city. So that has been really interesting. And you begin to feel, yeah, we are part of a community here of people. And that's been absolutely amazing, I think, to see that. But at the same time, obviously, people reacting in different ways, and there are fears, real fears about the future, real fears about health. And so it just seems to have kind of focused in on some really important things of how things are in people's lives. So I'm part of the church that does a lot of work with the homeless and a lot of work with poorer families. And so we found ourselves, rather than, we've got a thing where we invite people to come and eat during school holidays and things when kids aren't getting school meals for free and stuff. But actually we've started delivering those around houses. And so it's amazing knocking on people's doors and actually, you know, taking food to people and vegetables and stuff. And so the church has changed from being a place where, it's amazing, it's changed from being a place where loads of people come every Sunday. It's now absolutely full of food that's being distributed all over the city and stuff. And you just think, this is a different side of church that actually is really exciting. And I know I love, you know, for us to gather together and worship together, but I love the idea that we've just got this mountain of stuff that we can give to people who are in need. And so it's really, really exciting from that point of view and feels really good. On a personal level, I think, yeah, I probably started with that enthusiasm that many had, and I signed up to all the courses that I could find online that were free and kind of went on them for about 3 weeks and then forgot all about it. You kind of lose that momentum. And so it has been that sort of thing of trying to keep going and trying to keep that momentum and energy up. In terms of writing, it's interesting. I've not kind of crystallized it. There's a couple of things that's interesting that I've written in the past that I've suddenly thought, wow, this suddenly really matters now. Kind of songs have taken on a new meaning and a new energy. The song I was working on that I wrote last year that talks about when you're facing death and you leave loved ones behind. And, you know, so that final walk into Jesus' arms is you walk alongside him. But people are literally saying goodbye to family and going into hospital, not knowing whether they'll see them again. And that's just, you know, suddenly that line of a song, you kind of think, wow, this actually has taken on new significance. So it's kind of interesting when you kind of think about it and keep your kind of spiritual antenna up, how things take on a new emphasis, and how, I suppose, as the people of God, we follow up on those emphases and see, you know, what God has to say about the situation that we're in. So yeah, it's a fascinating, amazing time. I think we'll look back on this as the best of times and the worst of times, probably.
Yeah. Oh, Stuart, that is so great to hear. I mean, there's so much in that, and we'll definitely touch on some of that. You were saying about the church, the way things have been flipped, the way we're now thinking completely differently. But you made me think, I love what you were saying just about this has been a season to kind of go back and kind of rethink again what our voice is in this time. And I guess I wanted to ask you, Isaac, you mentioned this a bit already about finding your voice. What has that meant for you? You know, yeah, touring's been stripped away. How have you connected with people? What has been the real way you've kind of said, right, this is what I need to do in this moment?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, for me personally, I'm the guy that takes like a week to respond to a text message, as you know, and I don't read my
Oh,
emails.
yes. Oh, yeah. I know.
So I've really been trying to focus on the quality of my conversations, because this space has opened up where we've been forced to slow down in life in a lot of ways. And so when I'm connecting with people, am I opening up myself to get into deeper relationships and ask deeper questions? So it could be something little. So instead of asking like, how are you doing? Because the majority of us will say fine. I ask, on a scale of 1 to 10, how's your day going? And then if it's like a 6, it opens up the question to, okay, why is it a 6? And you just have kind of deeper conversations. So I think it's just a case of seeing the space is there and utilizing it, and just taking it up to build those relationships.
Yeah. I think one of the things you've done that I've seen you do a couple of times is where you just put out on Insta or whatever, do you need prayer for anything? Like you just said, just how's that worked? Have people been sending in? It's a great way of using your voice in this time. You know, what's happened when you've done that?
It's been incredible for my prayer life, because I actually have to pray. And because it's anonymous, and no one knows that I'm doing it and who I'm praying for, people have been sharing some really deep stuff, from I'm worried about how my exams are going to go because I don't know what's happening with school, to I've just lost my best friend, to I need help with self-harm. And it's just built a closer bond without breaking any safeguarding rules, with me and the people that connect to my music, because they know I'm on my knees on their behalf when they can't find the words. And yeah, it's been special to be able to do that once in a while.
Hey, mate, thank you.
That's so amazing. Well, I mean, songwriting, we'll get into this a little bit. In Nashville, I mean, everything kind of ground to a halt, for a while, with everything. Obviously no one was meeting in person, or at least they weren't telling anyone they were meeting in person. Maybe there were a few. But Lucy, talk a little bit about your creative process, even before, COVID, but also in the last 3 months. Do you tend to write more on your own? Have you been doing some co-writing, some online writing, that sort of thing?
Yeah, so I think I started writing songs when I was about 16, and I always wrote on my own. Well, for years basically, and because songwriting was just such a personal space for me, it was such a space to kind of process emotion and process what was going on inside me, which I think it is for a lot of songwriters. And I think I came to co-writing quite late, actually, probably only a few years ago, probably because I felt confident enough to actually believe that I had something to bring into the room and I had something meaningful to say. And then since then, I've just absolutely dived into co-writing as such an incredible way of writing a brilliant song. So I've done a number of trips out to Nashville, written with people out there, written with people here. And I just think in terms of writing songs, I think getting together with, sort of depending on the song, I think even now, some songs I know I have to finish on my own, and some songs I know I need to bring somebody else into the room to really help to get it past the finish line, because I just don't have the full revelation, or I don't have the full idea to get it there. So yeah, I think now it's sort of a mixture of some songs that I just know I have to get there on my own, and others that I'm like, actually I need help with this, and I want to bring some different perspective into the room. So yeah, it's a mixture.
Yeah. Have you done the Zoom write yet?
I have, and it was just so painful from the point of view side of things, because I am just not technical. So I was like trying to get my microphone to go, like just the cables were just very stressful. So yeah, I have tried, but I don't think it's my preference. Yeah. Unless I'm an on-hand tech person all the time.
Yes, I've heard lots of that. Just yeah, especially first time writes with somebody that you don't know. Not a great way to make a first relationship.
Totally hard to break the ice over virtual communication.
Totally.
Yeah, there've been so many challenges, haven't there? And I guess one of them, as we've touched on already, is online worship. And this is massive. Like the demands seem immense. And Tim, who happens to also be my boss, by the way. This is always a bit complicated. You've always got to let him win it. Always got to let him win at golf. But basically, but Tim, that it's been massive, hasn't it? Just this season of online worship. I'm sure there are loads of people out there right now who are thinking, help, we're struggling through, we're getting through, or they found a pattern rhythm. How would you encourage? What do you think we've learned?
Oh, well, I think it's it's been fascinating. It's like a new skill of leading a people in worship when you can't see them. And I think what we learned pretty quick, and a few times I've led worship, is you almost have to imagine firstly that there are people with you. So what I would do is, you're sort of staring at this camera, but I'd begin to think about people in our church and imagining them, and the mum or the dad battling with homeschooling, or the elderly person who's got to shield and is nervous, and the kid who's bored, whatever, and you begin to imagine these things, and it helps you to lead better, I think, because leading is such an important part of worship leadership, is the pastoral thing, leading people. It's what sets it apart from being just performing to people. You're trying to release people. So I think I found that really important, to try and imagine your church, your congregation, where they are, and just your leadership, your way you lead is going to probably be more engaging. I mean, the other things, I think you've got to keep almost trying to teach people, because the biggest danger and the biggest temptation is you just sit and watch. Oh, look who's on keys today. You have a little chat over a cup of peppermint tea with the missus, and what's the governor doing now? And you kind of watch it like a TV show. And actually, we've been trying to encourage our church congregation, why don't you stand up, why don't you sing out, come on, you pray now, just trying to encourage that engagement, because I've loved the thought of actually scattered around our city, all of our church and houses and flats and apartments are worshipping Jesus together. So I think you've had to try and envision people. And then the other thing we've tried to do is, I've seen different churches, you've got a few options, but we've tried to lead in the way we would on a Sunday and create a bit of a flow, rather than just having one song and now it's going to be a talk and now another song and now it's an every church will do it differently, and that's the beautiful thing about diversity within church. But I think we've tried to think we believe worship is a spiritual activity, so where God's spirit encounters our human spirit and he begins to transform us and encourage us and shift our perspectives and bring peace. So we've been believing for and trying to create space for the Spirit of God to be moving and meeting people in their rooms. And we've actually had some great stories of that happening. And so we've tried to maintain the spiritual activity of worship rather than just focus on the musical online activity of worship. But man, it's challenging. And it's challenging to keep it fresh week after week. I think you've got to keep shifting things, changing things up a bit to keep people engaged. A few reflections.
Well, Tim, you guys have done a great job. We were talking about it before we started, but I feel like you guys have really done an excellent job with your live stream, and
thank you.
It's really interesting to watch. It sounds great. It's very passionate and worshipful, and so you and the team have done an incredible job of navigating through this season. Well done.
Thank you. Appreciate
that. Stuart, talk a little bit about just your creativity. Especially, maybe in the last few months, but also just, around the co-writing. I know you've written songs by yourself. You've written songs with other people. Obviously, the massive song being In Christ Alone, which I'd love to hear a little bit of the story behind. But just talk about that a little bit, and the co-writing process versus writing alone. There's a vulnerability aspect of writing with someone. You're bringing into an idea or something that you've really cultivated, or maybe that's been born out of a quiet time or a sacred space, and you're bringing that to someone else to help craft that idea or kind of mold that, and it's a real risk, for a lot of creatives. But I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I suppose my process has been quite ordered in a way. I mean, it's been probably because for a number of years I was writing songs on my own and never even considered writing with others. And then probably from first meeting and getting to know Keith Getty, we kind of very quickly slipped into a pattern of writing. And I suppose the process was, because it's very clearly delineated in some ways with us, that Keith is the melody guy and I'm the words guy. So he would kind of write a lot of melodies, and either we'd sit in a room together and listen to them, or he'd send them over. So it's kind of like quite compartmentalized in a way, our process. I mean, I've done some of that kind of sitting in a room with people and writing, and being a kind of basic, quite a shy guy, I kind of get quite terrified by that process. So I kind of quite like to have a little time to process stuff. And so these days, with Keith being in Nashville and me being in the UK, he'll send melodies over and I'll listen to them and critique them and think, what is this about? What is this, you know, what is the melody saying? And what is in my own mind at the moment? What am I thinking about? And I'm always kind of writing little ideas down of themes and things like that. So I think in terms of who you write with, I just found once you find somebody who is really strong where you're weak, and you complement one another, that's a really, really fruitful journey, because you can comment in a little bit on one another.
So Stuart, would Keith be Elton John and you be Bernie Taupin? Would that be a good analogy there?
I suppose that'd be right. Although, of course, Bernie started with the lyrics, and then Elton John's skill was writing melodies to that. I do not know how you do that. I have never been able to do that. It seems like the melody feels like an intuitive thing, and then I kind of go away and graft away at the lyrics day after day, you know, kind of like just wading through treacle, trying to kind of find what we're trying to say and all this. So, but it is quite a delineated thing. But I mean, when you get that relationship, and I think you can write with all sorts of people, and I think that's interesting, and some really work and some don't, and it's okay if it doesn't really work. If you're too similar or you're too different, then that's okay. You can try some stuff. But actually, when you find 2 or 3 people who you go, actually, this really works because there's a real kind of fitting together, then I think that's, you know, that's a really, really important thing. And then you begin to relax and you begin to be able to say, so Keith will write, you know, Keith is very prolific. I'm incredibly lazy. So he's really on the ball. He's really driven. I kind of, you know, think it's a writing day, get a coffee, wander around, then decide maybe tomorrow would be a better day to do it. I am just the greatest procrastinator. I think that's my real gift, is procrastination. So Keith will send the 10 melodies and I'll go to him, 8 of them. Nah, I can say that to him because he knows, you know, so I can kind of like filter his process and he can filter my process, and he can say too many words. It's too stodgy. I don't understand what you're saying there. And so that process, when you get that degree of comfort and that degree of trust in one another's ability to discern what's going on, then I find that a really exciting thing. And we've written with other people since then and stuff, and it all fits. But it's kind of when you get that really comfortable kind of thing where you know that you can really trust one another, then that's kind of a really cool process.
Stuart, at what point did you and Keith know within Christ Alone that did you feel like, you know, we've got something really special here?
I don't know whether you ever I don't know whether you really know that. I mean, it was a bizarre, the whole In Christ Alone process. I mean, probably some people will have heard this before because we've talked at many seminars about it. But Keith, basically, I met Keith at a conference, a Worship Together conference, in fact, on the south coast of England. And I'd not met him before, and we just had a coffee, and he said, I'll send you some melodies on a CD. We used to do it on CDs in those days, okay, at the turn of the century. And so he sent me a CD with 3 melodies on it. And the first melody I listened to, and I just thought, this is interesting. Because I didn't know who he was. I didn't know him from Adam. I didn't know what his skills were or whatever. And I thought, actually, this is a really powerful melody. So I started writing thinking, oh, it's a classic kind of melody, so it needs a kind of classic kind of theme. So I started thinking about the life, death, resurrection of Christ and stuff. And I suppose in terms of writing that, it began to flow. And by verse 4, I was kind of getting quite emotional and crying as I was writing stuff and everything. And it just felt like there was something about it. But it was a new experience for me. And it's a new experience of working with Keith. So, yeah, and so that became In Christ Alone. That was the first thing we wrote. And it's been downhill ever since from there. So it's like, I think Elizabeth Gilbert says in her Genius thing, my best years are behind me. You know that your best years are behind you, which is a terrible thought.
Oh, that's so great. So good to hear that story. And, you know, And I guess thinking about the co-writing process, and I love there are just different expressions here. I'd love to ask you, Isaac, like, what goes on in the room when you're writing a song? Like, what is happening? Kind of, you know, when something's feeling great, what does that look like?
Yeah, good question again. I think our psyche when we're in the studio is like we pick up the Bible first, put it in one hand, and then we pick up a newspaper and we try and bridge the gap. So, okay, Bible says God will never leave us or forsake us, but a kid's just been stabbed to death on the other side of the street. What does that mean to him? And how do we show reverence, but just don't hide away from the real stuff that's actually happening in life? And those are the kind of conversations that we have in the studio. I'm a rapper predominantly, so I think there's a bit more space to delve into the details of a story and bring things to life a little bit more. But on the flip side, I grew up in church and I absolutely love worship styled music or CCM or hymns or whatever you want to call it. So I just see everything we do as being a bridge, and I try and bridge the stuff that I grew up in at church with the hymns and stuff with the rap stuff that I do, and just bring Jesus to the streets, man. And how do we know if something's feeling good? I don't know if there's a formula, but it's just a feeling. I want to call it the Holy Spirit, you know. We've been in the studio a few times, Nick, and like when we wrote Cast Your Cares, that was the first song of that kind that I had written with a lot of melody and stuff, and I was singing and that kind of stuff. And if I was doing what I was used to, maybe that wasn't a good decision, but it just felt good in the room, so we ran with it, and it connected really well. So I think you've just got to go on what God's telling you in the room and how it feels, and not think about it too much. I've never been too successful with finding a formula and sticking to it. I just kind of go with the flow.
I noticed when we were writing, there was a moment at which you were like, okay, I like the vibe, I love the song, I'm getting into my headspace now, and I want to deliver what I need to deliver. It was almost like we needed to go to another room and allow you to kind of just feel out what you wanted to say. Does that happen quite a lot? I thought it was really interesting for me. It's like, oh, get out of the room, like we're sort of, I just thought it was really interesting the way you did that. And
yeah,
is that how you work best?
Yeah, I think so. I'm growing in that area though, but I think I have a little bit of imposter syndrome, and that the way that works itself out is I can be easily influenced. So if I'm in the room with someone and I know I want to say this and it's really important to, but they're like, oh, why don't we say this? I'll just be like, okay, do you know what I mean? And I wanted to kind of eliminate that. So I took myself out so I could focus and think about the stuff that I really wanted to say. And then I guess we can still come back together and edit and chop and change and stuff. But yeah, when I grow in my confidence, I'll stay in the room with you and we can write together.
That's great, man.
Nice.
Do you write to track a lot of times?
It varies, but yeah, oftentimes I'll find a tempo and a flow that sits right, and yeah, we'll write to track. But other times we'll start a cappella, and someone might get on the piano and start playing something, and it can go from there.
Yeah, that's awesome. Tim, talk a little bit about, obviously worship music is constantly shifting and changing, and especially in the last few years, I feel like, there's been a lot of creativity that's been injected into worship music, a lot of stretching of what we would normally be able to maybe even use in church, and so talk a little bit about just worship music at its foundation, like what, as a pastor and also as a worship writer, like what do you see as the definition of what worship music is and how it should be able to be used?
Wow, that's a question. I don't think there's, I think in some ways it's a shame when worship music's seen as a genre in its own right, because if you think about the vastness, the otherness, the enormity of who God is, we're never going to run out of lyrics and melodies and music. And if music's his great idea, he's the kind of creator God. and we are marked in his image, we carry this creativity. Surely, actually, what we should be seeing is just such variety in the church. I think, if anything, there's been a sense, perhaps over the last little while, where we've got a bit stuck in our, if I'm honest, sometimes in our expression of musical sung worship. And I think if you look historically, again, I was looking at it again, some of the early hymn writers, Isaac Watts and John Newton and others, when they wrote these hymns, When I Survey the Wondrous Cross, and it was so revolutionary for the church back then that they were kicked out of the church. The churches couldn't cope with the melody, and they'd often take a lot of the contemporary music sung in the bars and write godly lyrics, as it were, to them. And so I think one of the things I've loved seeing of late is more and more local churches finding their own voice and expression of worship. And we'll always have these songs that the whole, like the blessing. I mean, how many different national versions of it's beautiful that this one song at this time has really united the global church. But at the same time, I've loved seeing lots of local churches starting to write their own EPs and own worship songs. And I think we need to encourage people to find music that kind of helps them express. Like, I think what Guvna's been doing is brilliant. Actually, the last few years, I've seen some of the songs he's writing, or on his albums, becoming really powerful songs in local churches like ours. So Cast Your Cares has been a really key song for us as a church over the last few months. Probably when you started to write it, you weren't thinking local church Sunday morning singing this. And so I think the rules and the rule book is getting torn up. And I love, you see things like Kanye West, he releases this album, and it's like, listening to it, oh man, could we do this in church on Sunday? And I just think where we've often historically tried to put things in boxes, I think all those boxes are being shattered, and I think that's quite exciting. And I think we've got to be bold in not being so predictable and stuck. Maybe I'm speaking more to pastors here. If we get stuck on how we think worship should sound, there'll be a whole younger generation the church will lose their creativity. So I think we need to be bold, but that's uncomfortable as well.
Wow.
This is so awesome. We should just park here for a second and just dig into
the rule book's getting torn up. That's not for you, Nick. Okay?
I was thinking, this is such a good chat for a minute. Particularly, I'd love us to just, when you think about the UK as well, and I'd love to maybe draw in Lucy and then Stuart. Just what do you see happening with worship songs right now when you look around the UK church, or what do we need? What aren't we doing? As Tim was just touching on that, are we getting really generic, or what's going on?
Do you know, I actually struggle with those questions sometimes, because I think I don't actually know if I know the answer to what is going on in the whole of the UK. I think what I feel the body needs, which is what the body has always needed, is an authentic expression and a meaningful way to connect with Jesus, and people who will continue to point people to Jesus with songs that actually mean something to them. Like, I love what you're saying, Guvna, that you have a newspaper in one hand and a Bible in the other, and we take the things where there is seemingly a disconnect and there is seemingly so much stuff that's unresolved and so much stuff that doesn't fit into our neat kind of boxes or religious boxes, and our understanding of Jesus has to grow. It has to be bigger than the things that we're seeing in the world. So I think we need those songs, and I think there's a real hunger, like Tim's saying, a third of people in the UK are saying they've logged on to church. Like, there is a hunger that sometimes people don't even know they have for connection with God. And so I think that is what we, like, as worship writers, as songwriters, that is the need that we are trying to serve. We are trying to give people lyrics and give people words that are meaningful and will help them to connect with God. So I do think there is a growing hunger. I think the fact that the blessing exploded in the UK is just testament to the fact that, people I felt like it was such a badge of honor moment, where it was like people felt so proud to be Christians. You know, they felt like all of these different denominations of Christianity in the UK are being represented, and I feel so, so proud. So I think it was such an amazing moment of solidarity, and I think it really just showed that there's a hunger for God, there's a hunger for the real thing, there's a hunger for authenticity. So
yeah, that's so good, Lucy. Stuart, I wonder, like, you know, it's with Tim mentioning like so many, and we're seeing this in the US as well, like so many people tuning into church that maybe never came into church. And I'm wondering, you know, as I was hearing Tim talk about that, you know, does our repertoire need to shift at all, or the language, when we start thinking about people that are coming in that maybe don't have the foundations or the understanding from maybe some of the other things that we sing about? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the answer to both questions is yes, I think we do. And I think that it's okay to have a certain degree of self-consciousness in to consciously move to do that. But I don't actually think it's just about people coming in or looking in from the outside. I think we all need that. I think we all need to, I suppose for a number of years, I've been very conscious of the role that songs play in teaching. And so actually people are, we're helping to shape people's understanding of who God is by what we sing. And that's very exciting, and it's an awesome responsibility. But it also makes me slightly nervous when there are aspects of the character of God that we are singing a lot about, because we love singing about that, but there are other aspects of the character of God that we're not necessarily writing songs about. And therefore, in a sense, we may be guilty of diminishing our understanding of who God is. And I'm always encouraging churches to kind of review the content of the songs that they've sung over, say, the last 3 months, and say, what kind of a picture of God does that paint to people? Because I think there's a really important role for us to explore, you know. So we love singing about certain aspects of the character of God, but, you know, homing in on certain aspects like the compassion of God, and what does that mean? What does God feel about, you know, a very compassionless, uncompassionate society sometimes that we live in, that's divisive or is discriminatory and stuff. And what does God feel about that? And, you know, so for us to do that, I think as well, I love what Guvna B said about the like Lucy said, about the paper and the Bible. And I'm feeling a sense of, and I don't know whether this is happening much. I'm trying to do it, and I'm sure other people, you know, I'm aware of other people doing it as well, where we're kind of breaking down the walls of the church, in the sense that, first of all, we are singing songs in church that help us to live, not just help us to experience something on a Sunday. So I'm trying to write songs that help me on Tuesday morning when I've got difficult decisions to make. Songs that kind of equip me, that make me more able to walk with God day by day, not just homing in on a particular kind of experience, which is really important to have an experience of who God is, but also on a Sunday, but actually addressing the rest of that. So on that one hand, helping people with songs that will help them to live day by day, but also bringing in the reality of what life is, what life means for us. I think we can get a disconnect. We need to be really careful that church doesn't become an escapism, and actually we reflect what really happens in our daily lives in the songs that we sing. Wow. And I don't know, in daily life, sometimes I feel frustrated, sometimes I feel angry about the way things are, sometimes I just feel confused about life and what's going on. And sometimes, you know, just feel sometimes a bit of a sense of despair. And I think there needs to kind of make a unity of connection to say how I feel in daily life should be, in a sense, how I feel in church on Sunday. And so, you know, from that point of view, I think we need more angry songs that say, God, this isn't right, what's going on right now. This is really, or songs, God, I really failed this week. So I think bringing in the whole orbit of what life means and singing about the whole orbit of what life means and what our experience of life is will stop us from the kind of the escapism, which I often feel that, you know, the danger is we create a really positive vibe in church. And yet people are hiding how they're really feeling, because then they go out of church and they pick up all their problems again. And none of that really has been addressed. And in fact, we can almost be encouraged to feel like we shouldn't feel those things. So I think somehow bringing a reality in, I think my sense is we should be broadening what we sing. We should be broadening to bring it more into the real world of our daily lives and reflecting that, because I think that could be a really powerful thing. I think it connects up God in the church and God in our daily lives in a way that I think is really important.
Wow, man, Stuart dropping some gold there. That's awesome. Let's go to, we got a little bit of time left. I want to go and make sure we get some questions from our audience. And man, what a great question this is. This is one of the first ones that came through. It says, how do you think we can address the racial imbalance as we see today in terms of who is penning church worship songs? And man, this has been a huge discussion. I know for you guys in the UK, in the US as well, we're having lots of conversations about different types of artists and who's resourcing the church and why don't we have more songs represented from Black artists and that sort of thing. So there's a lot of great conversations that are going and looking at that. And I think the easy thing would be to throw this to Isaac and make him answer it. But I'd love to even meet Tim, like from a pastoral standpoint, because I know at Gastry, I mean, your heart has always been to be very inclusive, to be diverse in what you do. And there's a lot of intentionality there. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on, at what point do we start seeing more and more songs from artists and writers like Isaac begin to, or Sanash, who wrote Waymaker, those songs begin to impact the church worldwide?
Well, I think firstly, I feel hugely unqualified to answer this question. And I think, people like me, as pastors and songwriters over the last 20 plus years, need to say sorry that we haven't recognized enough unconscious bias. We haven't worked hard enough to embrace brothers and sisters who God's gifted and called, and we've got comfortable in our set ways of doing things and our styles, and I guess being blind to a great injustice going on in the church in the UK. The history in terms of racism is very distressing, much like America. So I think firstly it starts by people like me apologizing and repenting and reflecting. But then I think the only thing I guess I'd add, I mean, there's so much more to be said, but I think one of the big things moving forward is that there could be a quick knee-jerk reaction. And this is slightly my fear. There's a knee-jerk reaction, and then everyone starts writing with people from different ethnic backgrounds, and we all start using different songs. And there's, I guess, a bit of a place for that. But if we're really going to see long-term transformation and change, it's going to happen. And this is people like Isaac and other friends of mine who've really been helping me see this. It's got to be relationship. This can't be like, let's all quickly change the set list for a year. Because we could sing different songs, but nothing's shifting in our churches in terms of, and bottom line, this isn't about the music, this is about the people in our congregations. How do they feel? How do they feel that their cultural backgrounds are being celebrated? And I think we've got to look at Revelation 7, where we see every tribe, every tongue represented, gathered around the throne of Jesus Christ, the Lamb at the center. Jesus has to be at the center of all of this. And again, it's interesting, isn't it, that the cultural background, they're not just being tolerated, and we're not all becoming this kind of oneness. No, they're being celebrated. So diversity has to be celebrated. But if we're going to see over the next 20, 30, 50 years, transformation is going to happen by key friendships being built. And then always the best, Stuart was just talking about developing your relationship with Keith, and then there's trust and this depth of friendship, which means there's a greater level of creativity. And I think that's what we need to see around musicians and around people, I guess, a bit like me, stepping back to release others to take more of a lead and to be humble enough to say, gosh, there's so much I need to listen and learn from you. And so I just think whatever happens, long-term change will happen through deep, genuine, authentic relationship.
Wow. That's great, man. Talk a little bit about, and maybe, maybe we'll put this over to Lucy and let her talk a little bit about it. One of the questions that came in was, we've, as Tim mentioned, we've attracted lots of new people into our online services. What happens when we reopen our churches, and how do we transition those folks from online attenders and watchers into actually being a part of a community? Small question.
No, that's an amazing question. I mean, I think I can probably speak from my church's point of view, but what I am really passionate about is that the community that we have opened our eyes to in this time feel so embraced and feel so welcome at church. So similar to Stuart, our church is basically completely empty. It's a massive Anglican church in the south of London. It's completely empty, but now it's basically a full-time food bank where we go out and deliver food to families in the community. And those are the people that I'm excited about feeling like they have a place at our church when the doors open again, or that they have a place where they can go and talk to people and feel not alone, because we're encountering so many families who are just stuck at home and kind of don't really have many people that they can talk to. So I think it's probably similar to church when it's not online, which it is relational. It is just making people feel welcome. It is making people feel like they're accepted, they're embraced, and letting people know that like the door is open regardless of where they come from or who they are. So I think that is the message that I hope people get through this online experience, and then when we come back to being together, that they really do feel like, actually I could go along, and I'm actually going to find people who really want me to be there and who will really embrace me. So I guess it's just letting people knowing that the door is open to them and there is a space for them in a community.
We're getting some great questions in, and we're loving your answers, guys. Thank you so much just for sharing the way you are. This one, I love this question. It says, with the tradition and stuff of religion stripped away in recent months, what's the one thing you will not bring back and the one thing new that you will keep after this season?
Wow.
So it would be great to hear from, Stuart, come on, tell us what are you thinking? Like, in this season, what's made you rethink that you think, I want to keep this going right now?
Well, I suppose the interesting thing is it probably for all of us has re-emphasized, even though we've talked about it, but actually we felt it for ourselves, the value of friendship, the value of one another, when we've not been able to meet together. And so much stuff that I know I've taken for granted and we all take for granted, when that's taken away, you're suddenly going, actually, I want to be intentional. I love, to be with my friends. I love to be with other people and really valuing that. And I kind of think, I was kind of half jokingly saying this a bit earlier before we came on, but actually having seen that so much of what we do in church seems to work when you're actually watching it, like when people are when people are preaching or whatever, or certain aspects. I'm kind of thinking, we do spend an awful lot of time in our churches sitting next to one another and looking at something, and not quite as much time as we should talking to one another and actually enjoying one another's friendship and getting to know one another. And I kind of think if there's one thing that we really want to get back to, it's actually prioritizing who we are with one another, even beyond, it's almost like you could partition some of that stuff off, some of the preaching and stuff like that. You could actually do that in a different way. What we don't want to lose is this need for one another, this recognition that actually we do need one another. So I kind of think I'd love to see our church services somehow foster that a bit more, a little less kind of looking at the front and a little more turning around and being with one another. I don't know what that looks like, but I think we all kind of feel like we need that more than we did before all this stuff. It's more precious to us than it's ever been.
Wow, that's so good, Stuart. Man, this is a great question. You guys are asking incredible questions, hard questions too, man. This isn't the easy stuff. And I'm gonna give this to Isaac, just because, I mean, as an artist and a writer, I'm sure you've probably wrestled through some of this. But this question was, how can we as worship leaders and songwriters, I would include artists in that as well, but protect the heart of worship in a music industry that can be driven by profitability. There's, all of you at some level are songwriters, yes, for the church, but also you're commercially songwriters as well. there's always a tension between those two things, which is probably good. But Isaac, talk about that a little bit, and just, how do you balance those two things? At what point do you step back and sort of check your heart and, and have discussions with the people around you as you're walking through and working through those issues?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think on a simple level, it's Matt 6:33. Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these other things will be added. I try and center my life around that verse to make sure that my heart's in the right place. When I'm writing songs, when I'm making decisions around my ministries, when I'm thinking about opportunities that come up. And also, I just think all the decisions that we make when it comes to music should be, to worship should be, how do we write something that helps people connect to Jesus? Anything else is secondary. So I think for me, I just personally make that my primary aim. Maybe a little bit different because rap is so expressive, but corporate worship, as we know, is an amazing thing at galvanizing people collectively, pointing people towards Jesus. It's very vertical and outward looking to who is in control. Deep, personal, and I think if I'm keeping those things in mind, and if we are keeping those things in mind, then all the other stuff that we can sometimes get lost in doesn't become important anymore. I'm not saying it's always easy to do that, but yeah, I just think it's a case of waking up every day and checking your heart.
Man, that's so good. Anyone else sort of wrestle with those things or have any thoughts around that?
Yeah, totally. I just completely agree with Isaac. I think it's staying humble and not believing your own hype. Like if God wants to use you on a big platform, let him do that, but don't go seeking those platforms. I think the greatest thing we can do is seek to have a pure heart before the Lord, and just stay grounded, stay humble, keep having people in our lives who will, speak truth to us, not just kind of big us up. So yeah, totally agree. It's all about the heart at the end of the day.
Wow, man, so good. You guys are amazing. Great discussion. Great audience. I mean, I really appreciate it. I didn't get any questions about Tim's beard or his hair, anything like that, which is, you
just think what this could have been if we had, but anyway.
Usually there's a few of those, but I want to say thank you to everyone. I thought it would be great just to, we've got an audience, which is amazing from all over the world, people that are serving the church in different capacities. And I feel like, we would be remiss if we didn't offer a prayer for them before we leave today and before we break up. But Pastor Stuart, would you be able to maybe pray over those that are listening along and just serving in their churches and bless those folks?
Sure. Okay, let's pray. Father, I thank you for what you have called us to. Thank you that this is such a wonderful calling that we have, whatever it is, wherever it is that we are called to worship and to minister. And it's such an incredible thing to do. And Lord, I thank you for this amazing gift of creativity that you've given us, that we can explore it. And thank you that because you are creative, we are creative too. And so we really want to explore that to the full. We want to treasure it. We want to nurture it. And we want to use it in order to more deeply express who you are through what we write and what we sing, to more deeply express to others the amazing nature of who you are, the depth, the breadth, the height, the beauty of who you are through what we do. So I pray for every single person who has been watching this. I pray that there will be a real expansion and deepening of the creative process, a real deeper inspiration, a deeper sense, a deeper insight into who you are and what you want us to know about you and what you want us to do for you and how you want us to walk alongside you. So I pray, Lord, just inspire us Let us be diligent. Help us to be diligent, to be constant, to be really seeking after you with all our hearts, that we may see some wonderful things happen through the songs that you inspire us to write, and that this may have an impact, not only in just deepening our experience of you on a Sunday, but actually deepening our understanding and experience of you in every single aspect of our lives. I pray that you will do that, because only you can do that. And we pray that you will do that for each one of us, to search the heights and the depths of who you are through what we write. Amen.
Amen.